Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Under the Shell, Season 1, Episode 2, presented by Terrapin Sports Central. I'm one of your co-hosts, Cabot Ireland, joined by
Sam Jane,
Brendan YSL,
Michael Big Mike Howes.
Sam. We have an interview this week, do we?
Yeah, so me and Brendan had the fortune of sitting down with strength and conditioning coach Holly Frantz here at the University of Maryland, and she kind of talked to us a little bit about her journey and how she got to where she is and what goes into being a strength and conditioning coach. So we're happy to have her on the pod, and you guys can go ahead and take a listen.
So it's sort of funny. I never knew that I was going to be in strength and conditioning as I was in college. I was a collegiate athlete at a mid-major school, and I had 4 strength coaches in 4 years. So there really wasn't, strength and conditioning was not on my radar as anything that I was, interested in doing. But I will say what had happened in my senior year is we had gotten a new staff. Coincidentally, it was actually Urban Meyer's first head football position. He came to Bowling Green State University and brought strength staff from Notre Dame with him. And that staff sort of really revamped our program. And it was much more centered around team, kind of building and putting you in situations of adversity and being competitive. And it just was super engaging. And I just felt like I had really thrived in that environment. And, I saw my performance increase, but I also enjoyed what I was doing in the weight room because of it. And going into my final semester, that head strength coach had asked what my plans were after graduation. And I knew that I was going to be into coaching. I just thought I would be into softball coaching because that was the sport I grew up playing. And he said that they had a graduate assistant position in their area and if I would be interested in that. And so I was like, well, I didn't know that was a job, but, free school, sure. So I ended up doing that and getting my master's degree at that point. And honestly, probably within the first month of being on the job, I was like, oh, this is totally what I'm going to do, for my career path, and really haven't looked back since. So spent a couple of years at my alma mater, had an opportunity to then join that Notre Dame staff for a year. There was another coaching change when Urban actually went to Florida. So I've been following him around a little bit. So that impacted, who was going to be and remained at Notre Dame. So I looked elsewhere, moved on to Xavier University, more of a basketball school in Cincinnati, Ohio, spent 4 years there and then got reconnected with another Notre Dame person, Heather Mason, who was an assistant there for a number of years, but then became the head strength and conditioning coach at the University of Tennessee. So she had a vacancy and then called me down to there. And then I spent the last 9 years at Tennessee, and which sort of led me to this leadership opportunity at Maryland. Definitely was time to move on. I'd been at the same level within my career for almost its entirety. And so needed to definitely continue to move up and move on. And those positions are really difficult to come across, especially being a female in the field. But thankfully, Maryland came along and I had an opportunity and knew some folks here on our staff. And so had a good look at the program and the leadership that we have in place here. And what I saw is a lot of diversity. I saw a lot of opportunities for upward mobility within staff, which is another thing I really looked very closely at before taking this position. And honestly, 4 years ago, I took this position and it was well worth the wait. So very happy, but long path to get here, but it was worth it.
Yeah, and so, you talked about some pretty prestigious universities with Notre Dame, Tennessee, Xavier, all relatively high standard athletic schools. How does when you go from school to school and they have different priorities in terms of what athletics is, like Tennessee, I'm sure puts a lot more resources into their athletic programs than maybe like Xavier or Bowling Green does. How does that change what you do as a strength and conditioning coach in adjusting to, okay, I have these abilities, now at this school versus what I had before, or does it relatively stay the same?
Yeah, good question. And, thankfully my start was at a lower level school. So anything that I moved to, it was always, I have more opportunities, more resources, as opposed to starting at a very high level or, high budget school and then needing to go reverse. So from that standpoint, I'm always very humble in my upbringing and the way I sort of quote unquote learned. And so anything that we're able to do moving forward has just been an addition to it. So yeah, the resources are different. But honestly, what I really like about Maryland is even though the resources might be different, the people are different too. And that's what really has set our program to the forefront, is because we may not even have the same resources across our own conference, let alone in the SEC. But the way we have to go about things here at Maryland is a little bit unconventional, and you need to be creative. And what I love about this place is that we're very open-minded and progressive in the way that we think and the way that we approach things. So no question is a dumb question, and no solution is a bad solution if it's actually getting the accomplishing what we're looking for. So along that way, yes, the resources were different, but I would much rather be in a position here at Maryland with the progressive thinking, open-mindedness, and creative thought versus, maybe at a more established Southern school where it's, hey, this is just always the way we've done things, and they're not really open to those new ideas.
Yeah, and just kind of going along the realm of, working your way up through kind of all your experiences, what kind of like specific things have you noticed that have been the biggest changes in like the past 20 years with strength and conditioning? Obviously, like way more tracking and technologies and stuff like that.
Yes, yeah, definitely technology. I mean, that is kind of the driving force right now. And honestly, it's a good thing, because one of the challenges within my profession is it's very difficult to evaluate. There's really no measurement. We don't have wins and loss records. So how do we evaluate? How do we know if we're performing well? So it's been very subjective. So what technology allows us to do is put some metrics behind that. You can always do max testing and that type of thing. So that's all well and good, but how is it translating for them on the field? And so with the technology that we have now, we can actually monitor their load and making sure that, our number one priority is to minimize our risk of injury. And having the technology that we have now really gives us an opportunity to do that in an effective way and a measurable way. So that's probably the biggest change, is we are so much smarter now because of the information that we have available to us. Whereas in the past, that was not really it. You can put together the best program in the world, but if those athletes aren't doing it or they're not seeing that translate to them on the field, then it doesn't matter. So that's probably definitely number one. Number two, there are more opportunities for athletes in their younger years than what's been there in the past. And that can lend itself to two things. One, you have someone with experience in the weight room coming to you as a freshman, when in the past we really didn't. And that can be a good thing where, you don't need to teach as well, as much, because it's, we can be a little bit more advanced. But the other problem that does create is we now are inheriting athletes with limitations, with imbalances, with bad technique, with, all these problems that we now inherit these athletes and have to undo those problems. When as before, you may not have had experience, but I also don't need to undo any bad behaviors or, problems that you've had, throughout your career, because you've already done this high level of training as a freshman in high school. So, again, good and bad with that, but it has changed tremendously. And then I think the last piece is, these athletes, and honestly, the way these athletes are raised is very different than when I was, in college, where, you just kind of showed up, you did what you were supposed to do because that was what you were basically told, and there was a reason behind it. Now it's, well, my personal trainer doesn't do it that way. And you need to now have a 5-minute conversation on the side about that's fine, but they also don't train 40 people at a time. They train you, so there are limitations to the things that we are doing in a team setting versus maybe some athletes coming in from a personal training side. So a lot of changes over the years, some very, very positive. And again, I wouldn't trade that for the world. But there are some things that have come along with that that have made things a little bit more challenging too.
Yeah, kind of going off some of the points you made there. You talked about how it seems as if it's shifted to more focused training, right? And making sure the athletes are benefited. And it almost seems as if the old school type mentality of like, oh, we're gonna have 2 workouts and then 2-a-day practices, like, is starting to fade from the strength and conditioning program. There's still like old school coaches, but what have you seen in terms of like coaches that you work with wanting more so like, hey, I want this person to be her health or his health to be more, focused on this, or I know I want to make sure that this movement that we're doing today is intentional and purposeful rather than just like doing work to do work. How has that shifted? And like, did you see that kind of old school mentality when you first started to now, or is it kind of always like, been regulated, I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah. So a couple things. One, again, we know more now than we did before. And so when you were working with different sport coaches, for example, who might be used to a certain style of training or used to, like I used to just grind these athletes into the ground and we were winning championships. So we should continue that. With that does make things a little bit challenging from our side of things because we do have sort of a backup on, yes, that may have been the case, but we can't get away with doing that anymore for two reasons. One, the athletes that we inherit as freshmen have already been doing that for a number of years. And so we can't continue to do 4 years of a very high level, high intensity type program for them because they're just not going to make it. They're not going to be out on the field for you. So we have a better understanding for that. But honestly, it takes time too. We are a support role. So at the end of the day, we have the expertise in this area, but we do need to support and complement what's going on the field. So, or on the court or whatever. So if they are very high intensity with what they're doing with the athletes, whether I think that's a good idea or bad, I need to then back off so that we make sure that at a given day or a given week, we're really monitoring what that looks like. So with that, it takes time. It takes time. You need to start to build that relationship with that coach, understand their perspective and their experience, but then also start to explain your own experience and your own expertise. And slowly but surely, hopefully those two things will start to merge and you can come together with that. But it's a slow process. And, sometimes, mistakes in my career path have been wanting to do that almost immediately. And that just isn't how it works. And that's not human nature to come in brand new and want to change things. So understanding the time that it takes to build that trust and relationship and understanding people's perspective and finding ways to find that middle ground.
Right. And how have you want to talk a little bit about how you said how, athletes now are asking more questions, it seems as if I read a quote once that said, it's not, what are we doing today? They're asking, it's like, why are we doing this today? And how has that shifted in terms of the generations of young athletes you're bringing in and being, wanting to know, is it just take longer to build their trust, or is it just because they have so many voices and outside opinions that kind of influence what they're doing with you guys?
I think it's a combination. We have access. I mean, go online over COVID. There's 1,000 workouts you could do, so you think about all the competition that's out there when it comes to training. And then me as a strength coach needing to navigate that because I have the athlete saying oh, I saw in so-and-so, they did a circuit and it was, every minute on the minute and you're having us do X, Y, Z. So two things. One, there's so much out there that's coming into their minds and in front of their faces that part of the educational side for us as strength and conditioning coach in the collegiate setting is to educate why we're doing what we're doing and why it looks very different than what that YouTube station is having you do. And how does that relate to your performance? Because a lot of it's very general, whereas what we're trying to do is very specific. So needing to educate for that purpose. And then outside of even that, again, it's them already having the resources, already having the experiences when it comes to training before they even get to college. So they're very used to their own upbringing on doing things a certain way. So they get here and we're doing it differently. It's like, whoa, I thought this is how you do things. Now you're telling me it's different. So there's a lot more experiences that the student athletes have, and there's a lot more exposure that they have as well coming in, whereas in years past that really hasn't been the case, which is honestly a good thing. But I think for our purposes, we need to acknowledge and understand the landscape and then do a better job very early on and continuously on educating. So here's why we're doing this. Here's how it can work for you. Here's what happens to your body as we do these things over time. We do a great job when it comes to having an off period, explaining, hey, here's the program I want you to do over winter break for 6 weeks. Here's what it's going to do for you when you follow it. Here's what will happen if you do not follow it. So we're really laying out all of that so they can kind of see oh, shoot, of course I should be doing this, but I don't want to. But now we're saying, we now know and can tell you what will happen if you don't. So just a lot of education and being proactive with that, I think is the biggest thing. And it's gotten us to a good point. And, at the same time, our coaches understand what we're doing too. So if they're hearing the same message from me as a support staff and our coaches supportive of what we're doing, that goes a long way as well.
Yeah, so you've talked a bit about kind of the education as well as like the new technology. So what sort of more like specific technologies and data tracking have you implemented for these athletes? One, to show them kind of what you're doing is working, and like you said, kind of educate how you're gonna teach them at the University of Maryland. Maybe not going off what they've learned in the past. So like, what are the more specific things you've implemented here to improve that and show the athletes?
Yeah, I think the probably best example is, and I wasn't this particular strength coach, but someone on our staff who was working with our gymnastics team. So we have force plates, which are basically two platforms that we do a series of different jumps on. It can really track a million different metrics, but ultimately what we're looking for is your ability to load properly, your takeoff. We can also see your right leg versus your left leg on how you're doing those, how are you landing. And so what our strength coach did, and this is what many of us do, but I think gymnastics is a good sport where you can really see those results, is he was able to track that over time and then show the athletes the things that we're doing in the weight room. We're squatting, we're doing all these lower body movements, and you can now see on your results on the week-to-week testing that we're doing how your numbers are improving. And you can directly correlate your ability to jump higher, more powerfully, land more correctly. You're not leaning on one leg, and translate that to their sport. So they're able to have that aha moment of, hey, that's why I'm lifting more, and here's why it's good that I'm progressing each week, and this is how it's impacting my ability to jump. And if you can jump higher, you can, do better at your skills, no matter what skill it is. And then also, and very importantly, is that you're recovering too. So we also are using that metric each week to make sure that not only do we see that trend going in the positive direction, but if we start to see it going in a negative direction or plateauing, we can now have an intervention to that athlete and say, hey, we're starting to see these numbers, decrease a little bit. What else is going on? It can sort of stimulate a conversation around what that looks like. And honestly, any program we put out there, we want it to work for everyone, but it's very likely that it's not going to have the same training effect. So that gives us an opportunity to get more individualized with them about how they're responding to the program we have in place. And we might be finding that we might make some different corrections or different tweaks to the program on an individual basis. So seeing that direct correlation and having that data to support it was huge. And that really caused those athletes to 100% buy into the weight room and what they're doing in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And just kind of wrapping up a little bit, obviously you've worked with so many athletes over the years, so many programs. What's the coolest kind of strength and conditioning, like recovery or injury story that you have for us to send us off here?
Well, it's not a famous person, but I did have I had a volleyball athlete while I was at Tennessee, who actually, she was our strongest athlete. Her family was like all athletes. There was 4 siblings and they all were collegiate athletes. Her father was an NFL lineman. So her genetic disposition, she walked in the door with that. So I can't take credit for the things that she was doing, but tragically, she tore her ACL, even though she was like the strongest athlete that we had on the floor. She was just in this weird position, came down on someone else's leg. I mean, totally, you can't prevent that type of thing. But I think the biggest takeaway from that experience was that, as a strength and conditioning coach, we can't prevent injuries, but the stronger, more fit you are, the less likely they will happen, or the less severe they'll be, or the quicker you're going to come back. And the following year, she stayed for a red shirt and she was back and in time for season and had the best year of her career. And I just can't say the same for maybe someone else in the same situation, not having the strength base that this other athlete did and the gifted, just the natural gift that she had and the work that she put in to turn around in 1 year, which is totally unheard of from an ACL. And I really attribute that a lot to the work that she had already put in the weight room. And then her work ethic going through that rehab process. And That's one thing that I always tell athletes is we cannot prevent you from getting hurt. It is a competitive situation that we can't predict, but we can minimize that risk and put you in a position to be very successful when you come out on the other side of it.
Thank you so much for coming on. It was really cool getting to hear kind of like talking about athletes and all the stuff that goes into them competing and getting them ready and fit to compete. And you guys are obviously a big part of that. And I think it's really cool that, especially being a woman strength conditioning coach, that's something that's really cool. So thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate
of course.
Have a great rest of your day.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, unique story. Worked her way up, started playing softball at Bowling Green, and kind of from there developed the passion for strength and conditioning. Sam, I know that I was alongside you for the interview. Mike and Cav, I was not. So, Sam, I guess I'll go to you first. What were your takeaways from the interview?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's super interesting how the strength and conditioning, really one of the big things I took away was the shift in generations. And she's worked at so many prestigious places. I mean, Tennessee, Xavier. She obviously worked at Bowling Green with Urban Meyer. She was at Notre Dame. Like, these are all things that all universities that have pretty prestigious athletic programs. And she talked a lot about how each place you go to, depending on the resources you have, it's an adjustment, but you also have a certain standard that you want to follow. So that was something I found super interesting. And another thing that we talked about with her, Brennan, was how generationally athletes have kind of shifted in terms of their mentality towards weightlifting and how she approaches an athlete.
Yeah, I was talking about this with Cabot actually the night before, going to the interview, kind of what we thought we might get out of it. And we were talking about what's it like for freshmen, what happens when freshmen come into the program, or even, grad students, people who are new to the program, and how they kind of adapt to the strength and conditioning program. And one thing that I took away from the interview is I was surprised at how much reteaching and relearning they have to do to the athletes, and that they're coming in because they're high performance and because of how competitive D1 sports or Big Ten sports are. All these athletes are coming in with some of their own training programs. And when they get to the University of Maryland, the strength and conditioning program really has to educate them on what they need to do to make sure that they're up to date and doing the right stuff for their bodies.
Yeah, unfortunately, Big Mike and I weren't able to sit down for this interview, but the boys, Sam and Brendan, got it done. And I was really impressed by the way that the strength and conditioning program, when the incoming freshmen come in, they evaluate them, they teach them to train properly, focus on their sports, and it's just try to build that mindset of training the right way and strengthening the athletes in the proper way to perform at the highest level in their sports.
Yeah, it was really interesting how she kind of compared it to like a double-edged sword, right? Like the cool thing now with athletes today is a lot of them come with a lot of weightlifting experience. They're lifting from freshman year, and that's a good thing because they don't have to spend as much time. Yeah, freshman year of high school. My apologies. They don't have to spend as much time like teaching the basics, right? Like, here's how you bench press, here's how you squat. But a lot of times she also said that these athletes have so many different voices. Like, they have a personal training coach, they have their high school coach, and they're all telling them different things. So it's like to be able to get them to really focus on one thing, that's something that she said was a challenge. And I just thought it was really cool how she talked about how athletes now, she agreed with me when I brought it up, is that before it seemed as if athletes would ask like, what are we doing today? Today it seems as if athletes ask, why are we doing this today? And it's really just trying to gauge like what they're doing with their bodies. And she says it's just getting them to trust her,
Yeah, they really get a good understanding of what they're working out and why and how it can help them perform in their respective sports.
Yeah. And so now, obviously, again, thank you to Holly for coming on the podcast, and we now have a new friend, so friend
Absolutely.
of the pod. So, but moving into this weekend's actions, it is Parents' Weekend. And
happy Parents' Weekend, happy Family Weekend.
To all those who celebrate.
Unfortunately, it has not been a happy Parents' Weekend for the Maryland football team.
No, Maryland has not won a football game on Family Weekend since 2018.
Yeah, and it's going to be a tough task this week. Mike, Purdue coming in off a big win at Minnesota, who a lot of people after their beat down at Michigan State thought they were the Big Ten West favorites. What are you looking for in this game?
I think the key for Maryland is just getting the run offense going. Purdue has held opponents only 2.9 yards per carry. If Maryland can't get Roman Hemby and Antoine Littleton going, the offense might have trouble moving the ball. Purdue's secondary, they're not great, but they're not too shabby either. Tanner Morgan was playing great for Minnesota with a 77% completion percentage and a 7-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. Then last week, Purdue's secondary just absolutely shut him down. He threw 3 picks and only had a 54.5% completion percentage. So Maryland won't want to get into that same situation, forcing Talia, to pass the ball down the field.
Yeah, Boilermakers also just allowing 2.9 yards per carry, so both sides of the ball, they're performing. It's going to be a big test for the Terrapins.
Yeah, and kind of playing off what Mike said for a little bit, a lot of what Minnesota's success was running to set up the pass, and Maryland's kind of relied on that too. So if they can't get the ground game going, it's forcing Talia to sit back in the pocket and have to throw on obvious passing downs, which that's when, you set up those big plays for the Purdue defense. And then on the flip side, there's been Maryland's defense has really improved. I mean, held Michigan State, pretty much shut them down in the second half last week, which is a very impressive performance. But this week coming in, Purdue's offense is definitely going to be a step up, and especially the danger man for this week, wide receiver Charlie Jones, transfer from Iowa, where they don't do a lot of throwing the football. In 2021, he had 323 yards receiving in 14 games. So far through 5 games, he's nearly doubled that, 588 yards to the air. And with him and Aiden O'Connell, those are both kind of late-round guys that have seemed to rise up NFL boards. So it's going to be up to Jacorian Bennett to get it, to try to limit Jones's production on the field.
Crazy what a change of scenery can do.
Yeah, and I mean it's been a struggle for Maryland with elite receivers. Rashid Rice had a big game against them with SMU. He had 11 receptions for 193 yards, and then Jaden Reed, they kind of limited last week, but he still came away with a pretty decent game with 61 yards and a touchdown. So they'll have to stop Jones, and if they can do that, I think the Terrapins have a good shot of slowing down O'Connell in the offense.
Purdue is much better than people think. I know the record says 3-2, but they had close losses against Penn State and Syracuse, and then again last week they had that 10-point win against Minnesota, who was ranked 21st at the time.
Yeah, it should be a good one, and there's a lot of other good action going on this weekend.
No, yeah, like you said, Mike, Purdue's been able to keep it close. They won a game without O'Connell against FAU. Austin Burton was starting at quarterback, able to squeak that out. So knowing that Purdue's kept every single game close is going to be a challenge for Maryland.
Yeah, but like I said, a lot of other, not just the football team, but there's a lot of other good action going around. Kevin, do you kind of want to dive into the men's soccer team, who have been on a heater recently?
Yeah, so we'll start off with a recap against Rutgers. They had an amazing comeback from down 2-0 in the rain in Piscataway. Nick Richardson, right back, stays hot with 2 assists and had the game-winning goal against Rutgers. You got to say, Malcolm Johnston with an audacious overhead kick off the assist from Richardson to equalize the game.
SAT word, audacious. Is
That's
that
a good
Big J
one.
journalism I'm
Bad.
hearing from the young
It
man?
might be. Just the ambition, and he went for it, and he able to connect, put the ball in the back of the net, got the Terps back on track, and then Nick Richardson with the game-winning goal in the 73rd minute. So, also gonna have to give a shout out to the grittiest play of the week.
What's
New
that?
segment
Whoa.
here. So
Drum roll, please.
grittiest play of the week
Can you put in a
is going to be a
siren?
new
Awarded
segment.
We'll get a siren.
You'll
to
get started?
Hunter George. First, he takes a 2-footer to the shin, studs up. He's looking around, seeing where the ref is. If he put in his glasses that day, put in his contacts that day, gets no call, gets right back up, gets the ball from Richardson, takes one touch, left-footed, bangs it, top bins, top left, puts some dip, swerve, and curve on that one to get the scoring started for the Terrapins. This was in the first half.
Unfortunately, this is not a visual podcast, so we will not be able to show you the video. But go check out any video on Twitter, and you'll be able to see.
Yeah,
Hunter
the
George's
Maryland
goal.
men's soccer
The goals
Twitter.
from that game were just on Twitter for the entire rest of the day.
I gotta say, Cavi, you did a great job painting a picture in my head of what that play was
Not
like.
a
Dip,
visual
swerve,
that was
and
great.
curve.
That
Dip,
was great.
swerve,
dude.
and curve.
Yeah, and then so kind of going into this weekend's action, what are you looking for?
Yeah, they improved to 7-1-2 overall, 3-0-1 conference play, riding a 3-game win streak. Showed no quit against Rutgers, and looking into the Northwestern game on Sunday, October 9th, 12 o'clock. They will be in Evanston, Illinois. So Northwestern's had a rough season. They're sitting at 1-6-1 overall, 0-3-1 in conference play, yet to get a win. Their only win of the season is at home against Houston Baptist. However, we've seen Maryland play down to their opponents a few times this year, but they're going to, I'd say, key to the game, they have to play their own game, possess the ball, control the game, stay sound at the back, utilize the wingers, play out wide. We've seen Hunter George whip the ball in so many times to create opportunities. Got crazy height in the box with Max Riley and Stefan Capetti. So multiple headed goals have gone in this year. So taking a look at Northwestern's leading scorers, we have Justin Weiss with 3 goals and 1 assist, and Ethan Dudley with 2 goals and 1 assist. Right now, Northwestern's averaging 2.5 goals against per game with 25 goals against total and upwards of 16 shots, while Maryland is sitting at 12 goals against and 21 goals for.
Yeah, seems like it should be on paper a game Maryland should win. But as we kind of also move into the other games for the weekend, we got the field hockey team. And Mike, they've also been on a heater as well.
Big weekend last weekend for the Terps. They had wins against number 3 Iowa and number 2 Northwestern. After those wins, they jumped 2 spots to number 2 in the national rankings. UNC, they're 9-0. They're the only team ahead of Maryland since Maryland is number 2, like I just said. Anyways, tomorrow, Friday, they're going to be playing Indiana. Indiana is 8-5 on this season, so Maryland's going to be their 6th ranked opponent so far this season. They're 1-4 in their previous 5 matches against ranked opponents. Offensively, they don't match up with the Terps at all. Indiana's only scored 2 goals a game. That's the 3rd least in the Big Ten. Maryland is 1st with 3.75 goals, winning by a margin of 2.4 goals per game. So it should be a little bit of a less stressful game for the Terps after last weekend's matches. After that, they're going to get the rest of the weekend off and then face Georgetown Tuesday in College Park. Georgetown field hockey, not the hottest thing on campus for the Hoyas right now. They're only 3-9 on the season, so it should be another less stressful game for the Terps.
Yeah, and definitely, I think Maryland, as they continue to win games against ranked teams, Brendan, it seems as if that program's starting to get it going.
Mike, so moving along in the season after getting those 2 big away wins, what are the keys for Maryland to ensure they get the home field advantage in the Big Ten tournament?
So they're going to be playing Rutgers, Penn State, Virginia, and UConn. All 4 of those teams are ranked. And then after that, they got the Big Ten tournament, which we've talked about the Big Ten already on this pod. That is a gauntlet itself. 7 of the 9 teams in that conference are ranked. So it's going to be hard for the Terps, but if they win the Big Ten tournament, they get a bye in the NCAA tournament. So they got to try to win that.
New powerhouse conference for field hockey, the Big Ten. Keep your eye out. So switching gears, we got women's soccer as well. Unfortunately, they've hit a 4-game skid after losses to Wisconsin and Michigan State last week, and they fall to 2-5-5 overall, 1-4 in conference play, sitting at 12th in the Big Ten. Looking ahead to Sunday versus Penn State at Ludwig Field at the University of Maryland in College Park. Coach Megan Ryan Nemser trying to get the girls back on track.
Yeah, I mean, it should be an interesting one. They're kind of seem to fall into a bit of a rut here, the Maryland has, but Big Ten play, continue to try to pull them out and get some credibility to her resume here at Maryland. And then Brendan, obviously, we lastly kind of to talk about the weekend, we have the volleyball team.
Yeah, we have a very special game. Illinois at home, 7 p.m. Our good friend Sam Jane will be on the coverage for Terrapin Sports Central. How you feeling about that, Sam?
Feeling good. Just trying to replicate my buddy right here, Brendan Wiesel, because I want to talk about the performance. Let's be frank. What's happening here this weekend with Maryland volleyball doesn't rival your performances in your first gamer. Nebraska, big game, sold-out crowd, and you delivered, buddy.
Not going to lie, a little nervous going in there. A lot of people didn't know we were going to set up the camera. Kevin got me all set up, and it was a good time.
Shout out Kevin McNulty.
Shout him out. Other than the Illinois game, Rutgers away on Sunday. A couple fun facts coming up. A couple things to look for Maryland. Renil Jones is closing in on the program record of an all-time 649 total blocks, just 2 away, so should get that. Maybe a fun thing Sam can slide in there in his gamer.
Don't be giving away my game recap, bro.
I won't. I'm sorry. And then Illinois, who Maryland faced off 2 weeks ago, they lost in 4 sets. So I was talking to Coach Hughes after the game. Maryland knows what they have to fix. He was talking about how that's a great opportunity to, get back in practice. Just faced them 2 weeks ago. So that should be a good game. And then on Sunday, Rutgers, another team who Maryland should be able to take care of. 1-3 in Big Ten play. Maryland hasn't won a game in Big Ten play, but
I don't know if Maryland, so far, you can't really say that they should be able to take care. They just got to prove it.
They have been very weak at the end of sets. They've come out strong. Against Nebraska, up 7-2 in the first set, replicated that in the second and fourth sets. But like you said, they really, really have struggled in Big Ten play to close out games.
Until you win one, you just got to go into every game acting as if you're the underdog. And I'll be interested to see what happens this weekend.
And then for our last segment of the week, we have our terrific turtle, and Mike is going to take us away with that one.
So our terrific turtle is going to be midfielder for the Maryland field hockey team, Danny Van Rootselaar. She scored all 4 goals for the Terps this weekend in their wins over Iowa and Northwestern. For her efforts over the weekend, she won Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week and NFHCA D1 Offensive Player of the Week. So congrats to her for that.
Yeah, super impressive win for Maryland field hockey. You take down 2 top 5 opponents. That's a good.
They're hungry.
That's a good month. To do that within a week span is something even more impressive. So
The Brown transfer made a great decision to come here and
she
leave
did
her mark.
I will say she's not the only one who won honors for the weekend too. Defender Rain Wright. She also got Big Ten Defender of the Week, and then she also got NFHCA D1 Defensive Player of the Week as well. So those 2, great job for them.
big weekend from the Terrapins field hockey team. But
Field
yeah,
hockey, definitely the team that has the best chance to win the national championship. So we're going to keep a very close eye on them.
yeah, and absolutely. But again, we just want to thank Holly Frantz for coming on, giving a great interview, and being able to kind of talk about the strength and conditioning of the Maryland Athletics. And we'll continue to bring on guests like her and like Tyler Cronin to kind of get deep into Maryland athletics and see what it's all about.
Maybe get some athletes in the coming future, but we'll have to see.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that'll wrap up Season 1, Episode 2. Cavi, you want to take us away?
This has been Episode 2 of Under the Shell, presented by Terrapin Sports Central. Enjoy your weekend, and good night.